I'm gonna love you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge. I'm Dan, and today I want to go over a World Championship match between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky. This was the 1972 World Championship match, and it was a big deal. You know, it's still a big deal even today because of such big history that it made. Back then you had the Soviets. They was dominating the chess scene, and this was considered, the game of the century. And then some people actually consider this the best game ever. So not necessarily because of the exciting flying tactics that was displayed over the board, but just because of the weight and the magnitude that it had on our society and culture. Because you got to remember, this was during the height of the Cold War. So this was just not a chess game between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky. This was like, the Western civilization versus the U.S.A. This was the big deal. This had a lot of political weight behind it. And so it was a very, very exciting time for chess. And if you were a chess fan, you loved it. And if you weren't a chess fan, this might have grabbed you and made you become a chess fan. So let's go ahead and get into the game and see why this was considered the game of the century. Bobby Fischer was white. He played c4 to start out. And from move number 1, this kind of threw everyone off guard because Bobby Fischer was known for his e4 play. He usually always started the game with e4, and he actually coined the phrase e4 is best by test. And he also said when he plays e4, he wins. So for him to start out the game with c4 kind of threw everyone for a loop. e6, knight f3, d5, d4, knight f6. Now this is a Queen's Gambit declined here, and the Queen's Gambit declined is more of a slower developing opening. Bobby Fischer was known for his calculating abilities, so that's why he liked to play e4 a lot, because he can get right to the calculations and the tactics and combinations right away. But with a Queen's Pawn opening, you kind of develop your pieces in the game early on in the game. You get castled, you get your king safe, you set up your structures, and it's more theoretical. It's more of a strategy-based game opposed to like the heavy fireworks and tactics right away. They could have actually played. They could have went into another variation. They could have went into like a Queen's Gambit accepted. Like if Black didn't play knight f6 on 3 here. Let's go back. If he would have played d takes c, then that would have been like a Queen's Gambit accepted here. And then White has a couple ways to grab the c pawn. He could either play Queen a4 check, and then he could swipe over and grab the c pawn. But some players don't like to play that way because they say they're moving their queen too much in the opening. Instead of doing that, he could have played e4, and then that would threaten to get the pawn back with bishop captures c4, and it also would establish a nice pawn center for White with 2 good healthy pawns in the middle of the board. He's coming with knight b3 next. He's going to have his bishop out on c4. He's going to castle. So White would really have the advantage and development on black that way too. So it's just another variation. They opted for knight f6. Spassky opted for knight f6. Queen's game would decline, and let's see what else happens. Knight c3. It's a good move, which it protects the e4 square, and it also develops a piece. So even with these top players, well, these are the greatest players of all time, but even the greatest players, they play by the principles. Develop their pieces, castle. Don't make a lot of pawn movements early on in the game. They follow the opening principles. Let's see what else is next in the game here. Bishop e7, developing a piece so he can make way to castle, following opening principles. Bishop g5, castles. e3, h6. Now this puts the question to the bishop, and asks the bishop where he wants to go. And let's see here. Bishop h4. Right now, Bobby Fischer, like I said before, was an attacking player, and so he would not want to give up the bishop here so early. And actually, the point of him going to bishop to g5 was not necessarily to trade off his dark square bishop for the knight, but he just wanted to develop the bishop outside of the pawn chain that he has here. Let me show you. He wanted to develop his bishop outside of the d4, e3, f2 pawn chain, so he could have a little bit more of an active position, an active game. Black plays b6 here. Okay, so this shows that he wants to do something with his dark squared bishop. He wants to fianchetto his dark squared bishop, and that would also support his pawn that's on d5, and also indirectly support the put pressure on the e4 square as well, in case white wanted to push e4 at some point. Okay, so now white captures, c takes d, which makes sense to do it now because black already used the tempo playing b6 with the intentions of moving his bishop. Knight takes d5. Okay, so then this capture here makes it where black can exchange some pieces and get some space, because it's fairly known that if you're kind of cramped, if you're playing an opening or a position that's cramped, then you want to exchange some pieces to give yourself more room, and that's why Spassky took with the knight instead of exchanging with the pawn. E takes d. Bishop takes. Queen takes. Knight takes d5. And then Fischer exchanged the knight here. Knight takes d5 because he felt like Spassky's knight was more active and in a better position on the board. So this is also another principle that you would like to exchange your weaker pieces for your opponent's stronger pieces. E takes d. Rook c1. This is a move here, a good strategic move where white can put pressure on black's backwards c7 pawn, because white has the semi-open c file to utilize. So this is a good strategic move for white. Bishop e6. Okay, black wants to play pawn to c5, but he couldn't do it on the last move because if he would have did it right away, he would have lost the pawn. Because if black would have played c5 right away, white just takes d takes c, b takes c, queen takes d5. So and it's hitting the rook. So black would have just lost a pawn right away, which is the reason why that he played bishop e6 first. Okay, now white went queen a4. Okay, now this is he did that so he can get his queen over to where the action is going to be. Because if you look at the position on the board, you see that black has a pawn majority on the queen side, and white has a pawn majority on the king side. So Fischer knows that Spassky is getting ready to launch, his majority attack on the queen side. So Fischer wants to get his queen out and into the game so he can be in the action. Spassky goes ahead and plays c5. Now this is a clever move here. Fischer plays queen a3, and it's actually pinning the unprotected black queen on e7. Rook c8, and that's to protect the c5 pawn, because the c5 pawn was being hit by the queen and the d pawn and the rook, so it was being hit by 3 pieces, but it was only defended by 2, the b pawn and the queen. So the rook to c8 evens everything out. Bishop b5. Now here white wants to swap off his light squared bishop, because Fischer felt like black's knight would be better in this position here, because black is pushing his pawn side majority on the queen side. So he felt like that the knight would be better for black to have than his light squared bishop. So, because normal play is for white to play his bishop out to e2 and then castle, but Fischer wanted to be a little bit more active and strategic there and try to swap off the light squared bishop for the knight. a6 puts the question to the bishop. Now, white does not have to move the bishop here. In fact, he doesn't, because the bishop is actually pinned. The rook is actually pinned because there's nothing protecting the rook on a8. So if black would have took the bishop, then white would have just simply took the rook on a8. B takes c5, castles. Now at this point, black protects the rook by having the queen and the rook on the same rank. So now white's going to have to move his bishop out the way. Back to e2 it goes. Knight d2, knight d7. Now the knight is finally developed, and white was able to utilize a great pin here because the queen is still unprotected. So black cannot capture the knight on d4 here. So white is going to be able to swap off the bishop here soon. Queen f8, and then white takes the bishop. Knight takes e6, f takes e6. Now black has a strong center here. He would like to play c4 and then move his knight in to c5. That would be a great position for black. But white gets to move too. So e4, breaking up that pawn center, or at least trying to. d4. And now his pawns had to move, so they're not as strong as they were before. The one thing about hanging pawns is that they're fine if they're together, but once they start moving, then they become weaker. f4. Now Fischer is going on with his majority on the king side and pushing, f4. He wants to push his pawns as well and weaken up the king side. Queen e7, e5. Now e5 is one of those moves where it's kind of locking in black's e6 pawn to be attacked. Since white has the light squared bishop, he can bring that bishop to c4 here and then eventually put a lot of pressure on that e6 pawn. Rook plays b8, attacking the b2 pawn, and making it where just kind of getting some counterplay going on there, because he can't just sit idly. He needs to get something going as well.